Good morning, everyone. My name is Hubert Zajcik. Welcome to our first Pulse breakfast. Sorry about the lack of breakfast, but hopefully you had some good breakfast or are having some good breakfast. I have my coffee here, and I appreciate you guys joining us. We have, of course, a great presentation for you here today with Michael Gorton. But first, a few items. As you know, there are 4 objectives with these Pulse breakfasts. And one of them is to show you, to connect you with each other, and we'll work on how to do that afterwards so the attendees can get to at least see who else was here. Number 2, and importantly, sharing a calendar of events. We have a bunch of events to share with you. Number 3, a startup that presents, and this morning you'll have a 5-minute presentation from a healthcare startup. And then number 4, the reason you all tuned in today, our featured speaker, Michael Gorton, telling the Teledoc story. So here's a quick run through. And of course, most of you know Lindsay Settles. She's in the background here working the Zoom channel. As all of you, we've been using Zoom almost anything in the last month or 2. And this is our first event. So glad to be back. Sorry I can't see everyone. I certainly do the next one, or at least the one in the summer in person. If you haven't been to our space, it is very empty right now. I was there yesterday. I want to point out that you can see how appropriately distanced you are from each other should you decide to take space with us. Most of you know this, but for those of you who don't, we have, of course, run the accelerator out of the program, but also have offices, and those are available for any kind of healthcare startup or healthcare related business. And as you can see, they are spaced apart, which might come in handy in the not too distant future, depending on what the rules are around all that. I also have started a podcast in January. If you don't know that one, it's on, you can find it on our website. Kind of obscured here, but you can find all the episodes on the website, and we have 8 or 9 episodes on so far, and we're going into our 2nd batch now. So here are our events. Obviously, heavy on our events here this month. There's a Health Wildcatters information session on the 7th of May. You can find all these events on our webpage. And that's it's really Ask Me Anything type of event. So if you're curious about Health Wildcatters, if you're considering it and joining us, or have any other questions, just join for the info session. And there'll be one where we actually see each other, all of us. On the May 12th, there's an event that's a multi-city event around healthcare technology and innovation, run by Megan Mokes at General Assembly. She's here in Dallas. I will moderate this. This will be a multi-city virtual event with participants from the West Coast, Arizona, Dallas, and the East Coast. So it should be really interesting around healthcare innovation. Then on May 13th, we have our Health Innovation Pitch Competition, and that is an annual event that we have every year together with the Healthcare Dealmakers Conference. This year, there's a little bit of extra programming around that. We turned it, since it's a virtual event, we turned it into a free event. So join us at, and again, you can find the sign up on our webpage. Join us virtually for a panel on health innovation and healthcare fundraising in COVID times, a pitch competition of 12 startups from all over the country, and I'll have a listing here in a second of the finalists, and a keynote speaker with Danny Toby, who wrote a book called The God Game, which has to do with artificial intelligence, and he's an expert in healthcare and artificial intelligence. And then our next healthcare breakfast, Pulse breakfast, is on the 2nd of June. And as of right now, it looks like that'll be a virtual breakfast still, but if it isn't, then we'll be happy to switch it over as quickly as we can to a real pulse breakfast. So here is my list of announcements. So we just, this is the first time we're announcing this right now. We just picked the finalists for next year's med.ventures pitch competition. And there are 12, as you can see, Atea from Dallas, Bexon from Santa Barbara, Cathbody from New York, Cryoscope from New Jersey, GeoMed Alert from Florida, Halo Health, so you'll get a double if you attend both events from Dallas, Frisco actually, Connected from Oregon, MedAdvisor from New York, Milestones from St. Louis, Missouri, Onacat from Delaware, Starling Medical from Houston, and Sequino from California. So those are the finalists for the Health Innovation Pitch Competition on that day of MedVentures. This was originally a full day event, an in-person event under the umbrella of Healthcare Dealmakers Conference, our friends at Polsinelli putting that one on. Having shrink this down to virtual, we flipped this to a half-day event, goes from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m., but we kept the pitch competition. It's so important to support startups in these times, and there are not a ton of pitch competitions right now. So we feel strongly about having this event and are really, really happy with these finalists, and they will pitch in tomorrow in a week virtually at MedVentures. And again, the event is free, so you can sign up on our webpage. And last but never least, the Health Wildcatter sponsors. Many of you might have seen this recently, but just to point out, Texas Health Resources joined us as a major sponsor this spring, or actually early in the year. And we're looking forward to doing programming with them and a variety of other events. But as you can see, we've got the broad support from a very, very supportive community of industry here in Dallas that is very broad, some healthcare, some not. And we couldn't do what we do without their help. But now it's my distinct pleasure to introduce our startup speaker. This will be a 5-minute presentation. Veer Mehta from Halo Health will give the presentation, and I think that is as long as I can manage to stop sharing my screen. So I will do that and switch it over to Veer. And also I will mention that you can post questions in the chat. Veer will not be in a Q&A, but Michael Gorton will have a Q&A presentation session at the end of the post breakfast. So if you have got questions along the way, put them in the chat and we will answer them there. So now handing it over to Veer for his 5-minute startup presentation. Veer, take it away.
Thank you, Hubert. Good morning, everyone. My name is Veer Mehta. I'm the founder and CEO at Halo Health Systems. I hope all of you are safe and well. Let me start by saying that clinical trials are a critical part of the drug development process. It's an issue that is front and center as we look for new therapies for COVID-19. At the same time, clinical trials are too expensive, they're too long, they are still paper-based, and they are burdensome on patients. I'd like you all to imagine being in a clinical trial where you have to record your medication timing, your vitals on a paper diary on a daily basis. Now imagine needing to make frequent visits to the clinical research site. And if you are one of 70% of Americans, the closest site is more than 2 hours away. Because of these challenges, life-saving drugs are not reaching the market in time. Our solution is a digital platform that accelerates clinical trials for pharma while reducing the burden on patients and clinicians. When you enroll in a Halo-enabled trial, you're provided a remote monitoring kit that includes connected medical devices like blood pressure meter and a blood glucose meter. You also get access to a fully integrated patient engagement solution that allows you to record medication timing, automate collection of vitals, record, get reminders, and also patient feedback. We take all that data, digitize it, and push it to our HIPAA-compliant cloud. Using our web application, the clinical research team is then able to access this high quality of data in real time. Hence, our solution minimizes the number of visits that you have to make to the research site. It eliminates paper diaries and ensures that you stay compliant with clinical protocol requirements. We recently participated in a study at Dallas Diabetes. This was an investigator-led study where we looked at the type 2 diabetic population and the occurrence of fatty liver disease. As part of the study, we were able to automate collection of FibroScan data, streamline the process of statistical analysis, and also greatly reduce the efforts of both the investigator and the research coordinator. So we successfully completed this study and delivered a 30% reduction in cost, a 20% reduction in timeline, and greatly improved the quality of data. The entire cost of our product is paid for by pharma. Here I have modeled a phase 2 clinical trial that includes 200 patients lasting for 6 months. And we have a subscription-based model where we're charging per patient per month for the patient engagement solution, and also charging a flat fee per month per trial to provide unlimited access to our web application. This gives us a total monthly recurring revenue of $50,000 and a total project revenue of $300,000. Halo fully supports what the industry refers to as hybrid or virtual trials, where you're minimizing the number of visits to the site. We have a fully integrated patient engagement solution and an end-to-end real-time compliance monitoring capability, which is a critical metric for clinical trials. We also offer workflow automation to further reduce the burden on clinical operations on a day-to-day basis. So we have a very experienced and passionate team, starting with myself. I have more than 15 years of experience in new product development of medical devices and digital health solutions. Had the opportunity to lead an engineering team at a medical design center, where we worked on a variety of projects, including Pfizer's first intramuscular drug delivery device for oncology therapy. Brian has more than 15 years of experience in sales and marketing across pharma and data analytics. And Allison has more than 20 years of experience running clinical trials for big pharma, including Sanofi, Novo, and Lilly. And Dr. Shah has expertise in digital health ventures. The worldwide clinical trial market is estimated at $45 billion. When you look at 6 indications across these 3 therapeutic areas, including endocrinology, cardiovascular, and pulmonary, and within pulmonary, you also have COVID, you're looking at an addressable market of $2.8 billion. Our primary customers are pharma and clinical research organizations are channel customers. In year 1, we're targeting small pharma and small CROs to be early adopters of our technology and help us build case studies for our future customers. Our initial revenues are anticipated from paid pilots. By year 3, we're targeting to be in 21 clinical trials with 2,500 patients online, targeting a revenue of $4.4 million with a $2.6 million EBITDA. So folks, clinical trials are an important part of the drug development process, and we are transforming them by introducing new efficiencies. We're currently raising our seed round of $500,000 as a convertible note and are 10% committed. So come join us to advance clinical research together. Thank you.
Thank you, Veer. That was great, as always. So now it's my distinct pleasure to introduce Michael Gorton. And if I were to use Michael Gorton's, so Michael and I were talking yesterday, we both have laptops with the camera at the bottom. And so I sent him a picture of what I do. I put books underneath the laptop right now. He's got a webcam on back order as well. And so that we can still use the laptop camera. And I showed him a picture. I was using 5 books, one of which was his. But if I were to use all of Michael Gorton's books, you would actually not be able to see me because he's written so many, and one of them I'll show you in a second. So if you took all his books, you would be clearly just seeing the ceiling right now, and that's just one of the many things about Michael Gorton that this intro is going to be way too short for. He's an engineer, he's an attorney, a physicist, and a serial entrepreneur. He has started up 12 businesses right now, as of right now, in the last 35 years. And among many other things, been on Mount Kilimanjaro and serves boards, has done all the things that you could in a lifetime or two already, and is not even close to being finished right now. His latest venture is back to space, and you know, we get to network a little bit. You can ask him about that. But he's here today because he's the co-founder of Teladoc, the largest telemedicine company in the country, probably the world, I assume. If I used one of Michael's books to prop up my computer. I pulled it out just now. It's this one, and yeah, there's a subtle extra piece here, and it's a really good book. It actually tells the story he's about to tell you in with some more detail. But for now, I want to just switch it over to Michael and have Michael take the microphone again. Questions, please, in the chat, and then we will curate them and ask Michael at the end of the presentation. Again, our goal is to be finished about 10 o'clock, so we got almost 40 minutes, including Q&A. Michael, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Hubert, and good morning, everybody. I am going to share my screen here, and the talk this morning is called "The Cost and Benefits of Building a Unicorn." And I think we all have or hope to have a unicorn in our future. And the thing that I can tell you is overnight successes are neither overnight nor are they easy. And so I'm going to spend the first part of this presentation talking a little bit about all of the pain points. Well, not all of them, but a few of the pain points in building Teladoc, and then talk about some of the cool things that are happening right now. But I like to start with this slide because any of you who have climbed an ice fall know how unbelievably dangerous it is, regardless of how good you are. When you stick those picks in the ice and when you put your crampons in the ice, things can still happen and you can fall. And that's basically the life of an entrepreneur. We get knocked down and kicked in the teeth every single day. And there are things that we absolutely can control and some things that we just can't. And when the bad things happen, the winners get up with a smile and they go again. And so, I like to say that Teledoc was born on the slopes of Kilimanjaro, or if you will, there really are unicorns on Kilimanjaro. So on the left is a picture of the largest mountain in Africa, not an easy climb. It's half the size of the state of Colorado, and it's about a 90-mile hike from start to finish. In our particular case, it was 5 days. If you look over on the right, you'll see this guy on the left side of the picture is me, and Dr. Brooks is laying down. During our climb of Kilimanjaro, Dr. Brooks was insistent that we build this company. I had just sold a company called Internet Global. I paid for all of these people to climb this 20,000-foot mountain, and we had a great adventure. But I think the unicorn that we found on Kilimanjaro, Dr. Brooks wanted to call cyber medical services. We ended up calling it Teledoc, but the genius who created the idea is this guy laying down here, and I helped him put together all of the pieces in the business model. So the thing is about when you build a company, most of you probably know, everybody's going to tell you, especially in the case of Teledoc, nobody's going to fund a deal like this. And if they would, United Healthcare would do it, or Blue Cross, or one of the big guys, you know. And so you get a lot of naysayers in the beginning, and a lot of negativity. And you know, we just have to get through these things. And so, but if you look at the stats, most ideas never get past initial planning. I mean, how many times have you heard somebody say, oh, I have this really great idea? I've heard a lot of people tell me in the last 3 or 4 months, oh yeah, I thought of an idea like Teledoc 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, whatever. The trick is taking it past the idea and moving it into a place where you're actually building something. And even then, 90% of the companies that get started fail. And that doesn't seem like good odds. And then once you get to the point where you've made it through the initial stages, you've raised your angel money, you're really rolling, and you can talk to venture capital, and venture capital says, okay, we're going to fund you. Even at that point, 70% of the deals fail. And the sad news is, for VCs, 70% is their metric. But for us, that 70% is an unmitigated disaster. We poured our life's money and blood and everything else into it, and I think I'm actually on either company number 13 or 14. So my LinkedIn says 12, which is why Hubert said that. But I'm working on 2 others right now, and I can tell you that every great entrepreneur has at least one failure. I mean, we basically learn more from our failures than we do from our successes. But it's fun to tell the stories of the successes. And so once we got Teladoc up and running, we tested it for a year. Dr. Brooks and I went to the Board of Medical Examiners with great excitement. We told them how we were going to change the world. And they looked at me and they said, Mr. Gorton, if you build this company, you will go to prison. And Dr. Brooks, we're going to take your license, and then you'll go to prison. So you want to talk about adversity? You know, how do you get through really, really extreme? It's when you walk out of the Board of Medical Examiners on a day when they've told you that the dream you've been working on for a couple of years is going to put you in prison. So, you know, we talk about getting knocked down and kicked in the teeth, getting up with a smile, and basically that's what we did. We got up with a smile and we win again. And so what happens next? I'm sitting in my office one day about 5 years into building Teledoc. I've got an important meeting, and my admin comes in and she says, I need you to come up front. And I'm like, Ruthie, you can see I'm in the middle of an important meeting. And she said, you need to come up front. So you want to know every single VC will ask you, what keeps you up at night? Well, how about the Drug Enforcement Agency is here with badges? You know, so you get up from your office, you go up front, they show you their badges, and they say, we're going to take this building apart. We want to see every single file. We want to see what you're doing. What were they concerned about? In 2005, 2006, the DEA was very concerned that physicians online were writing prescriptions for narcotics. The good news about Teladoc is we designed the system so that was just flat impossible. And so the DEA took our files apart. They turned us upside down for a month, 6 weeks. And then at the end of the 6 weeks, one of them came to me and said, you know, we really like what you're doing. How can we become customers? So there's a nice end to what does keep you up at night? The DEA is here with badges. So we all know this phrase, the early bird gets the worm. You know, if you're going to be a successful entrepreneur, you have to be the early bird. But I wonder how many of you know the second and very important part of this phrase, the early bird gets the worm. and the second mouse gets the cheese. So, you know, we could be pretty brutal in this description, but, you know, mouse number one sees this beautiful piece of cheese. That's you, the entrepreneur. You're working really hard. You see the cheese there, you run and grab it, and snap, the mousetrap closes. And guess what? The next guy gets to come in and say, hey, thanks for the cheese, Herman. And the reality in a lot of the successful endeavors, so let's go back a second to the slide where I said 70% of venture funded deals still fail. If you take that 30%, a lot of the 30%, you, the entrepreneur, you, the people who funded and built this company, get it to a certain point, and somebody new gets to come in, and the mousetrap snaps close on you, you leave, the next guy comes in, and ends up with the cheese. And I sort of tell this story because at the end of the day, Teledoc is an amazing story. You know, it's a $13 billion market cap company right now. The guy that I hired to become the CEO when I left is the second mouse. He's worth what, $250, $300 million right now. But the good news is I get to be the guy whose name goes on the founding documents. And until I have Alzheimer's, which I may already have, I don't know, I can't remember, but until that day, you know, I get the credential, and you can make money, you can lose money, but some things you can never have taken away. And mom told us when we were little, go get your college degree. It's something that you'll be able to carry with you forever. And all of you who are building companies, you know, the next thing after a college degree that's worth orders of magnitude more than a college degree is building a successful company. And so, you know, let's move on to the next point, which is the first investor in Teladoc put $25,000 in. It was a long time ago. That $25,000 is now worth $5 million. That's kind of a nice little stat. And so now we've moved from, okay, the early bird gets the worm, the second mouse gets the cheese. So let's look at some of the things that really make the benefits rather than the costs of building the unicorn. In 2007, we celebrated our millionth member right there in the US Capitol building, right under the rotunda. And so I can't tell you how many times, you know, sitting under that rotunda, watching a celebration with a Surgeon General and an HHS secretary and my millionth member in Teledoc, and actually my very first corporate member, who was a local Dallas guy named Joel Ray, also attended. And a few U.S. senators, Tom Coburn from Oklahoma, who was an MD, he was the only MD U.S. senator at the time, was there. And so, you know, think back at the DEA and the you will go to prison and all the nights of lost sleep and all the investors who said, no, this is a stupid idea, to now we're under the rotunda of the U.S. Capitol building celebrating 1 million members. But it wasn't over yet. We still had battles with boards of medical examiners at this point. One of the states had just before this hired an actor to try and trick one of our doctors into writing a prescription for a narcotic. The doctor did not do it, but we still ended up in a battle with that state until the local news found out that their board of medical examiners had hired an actor to try and trick a doctor, which doesn't seem right or ethical. But still, on this particular day, we're under the rotunda, we're celebrating our millionth member. And you know, at this point in time, we have 1 million members. We're delivering doctors to patients in 12 minutes for $35. And so just to give you a scale, before telemedicine, you could call your primary care physician on Monday morning and probably see him Wednesday or Thursday. So now it is 12 minutes later. If you saw that physician on Wednesday or Thursday, it was going to cost you $110. In this particular case, it's going to cost you $35. Here's the other side of that story, that what we did with Teledoc was make the entire process efficient. And so the average primary care physician coming into Teledoc was working 80 hours a week and making $148,000. Our physicians that were working 40 hours a week were making about 250. So before Teledoc, 80 hours, making 148. After Teledoc, working a 40-hour week, 4 weeks of vacation a year, and making about $100,000 more. So we have improved the efficiency paradigm in healthcare. And at the same time, we had a 97% satisfaction rating. One of the interesting twists on this whole 97% satisfaction rating is we hired Mercer, one of the really greats in healthcare, to do a survey for us, and they're the ones who came up with this number. We published it, and that is how we ended up with Tommy Thompson, the former HHS secretary, as one of our lead advisors and investors. That 97% satisfaction rating was unheard of, but even while all of this was happening, most of the states still opposed telemedicine. And the fact of the matter is, most of the states opposed telemedicine for a lot longer after that. But in 2015, you'll see right in the middle of the slide, 50 smartest companies of 2015. MIT, which is a great name recognition, and Teladoc was number 27 in the 50 smartest companies. And I like the fact that companies like Microsoft down here at number 48 were lower than us, and IBM, and these are some of the benefits that I think building the unicorn produced. But again, in 2015, Teledoc was still in a battle with several of the states who opposed what telemedicine was doing. Well, if you look at this chart, this is the last 6 months of what Teledoc has been doing, and $173.50 a share. It's basically a $13 billion NYSE company. So the financial piece of it is there, but what changed everything? And about 6 weeks ago, I got an email and a voice message from Richard Boxer, who was the 2-time Surgeon General candidate, probably one of the best respected and best loved physicians in America right now. And basically what he said in that email and in that text message was tens of thousands of lives were going to be saved by telemedicine. And in this pandemic, but in the years ahead, millions of lives will be saved. And so when you make a realization like that, it does a pretty good job of cleaning that slate, making it, changing everything for all of those battles and everything that happened over the years. And I'll give you another example. I've been the advisor for a company called Anytime Pediatrics for about 2 years. And Anytime Pediatrics, also a telemedicine company, has been trying to grow their business model. And then something happened in March. Coming into March, Anytime had done roughly 1,000 or so consults. All of a sudden, they were doing 1,000 a day and then 2,000 a day. Why? Because the world suddenly realized the value of telemedicine. It wasn't the continued process of growing like we had been saying, and everybody was predicting, you know, in 2021 or 2022, telemedicine was finally going to be well accepted. All of the sudden, the physicians got it, because physicians were getting sick and dying from the COVID-19, and patients weren't wanting to go out into the environment and be exposed. And so suddenly everything changed. We had our watershed moment, and the industry went from emergent into hyper growth. And so, you know, I like to start and end these presentations with Kilimanjaro, because, you know, as I said, there are unicorns on Kilimanjaro. And in this picture right here, what you can't see is the distance. So from this point down here to where I am is about 1,500 feet of elevation change. The other thing that you can't see is this material that we've been walking on is called scree. So anybody who's climbed a mountain, scree is one of the dirtiest words in mountain climbing. You take a step forward and it's so loose that you lose a half a step. So step forward, slide back a half a step. And by the time you get to the top of this thing, so we started this day of hiking at about 11 o'clock at night. The goal is to get up to the summit of the mountain by early to mid morning, and then off of the mountain before 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And in order to do that, you start at 11 o'clock at night, you hike all night long, you get to the summit, you take your pictures, and then you get off the summit. And if you look at this space here, you can ask, okay, where is the determination? It's, at this point in time, I'm about 30 minutes from the summit, and it's brutal. There's not a whole lot left. This is the 26th mile of a marathon, and it's the roughest, toughest point in this particular mountain climb. And I like to tell this story because in the beginning, I showed a picture of me and Dr. Brooks on the summit, and here's a picture of just me on the summit. And this picture is really important because I'm holding something. And I didn't know this was in my bag. One of my climbing buddies was carrying it, and right before we got to the summit, handed this sheet of paper to me. And basically what it was a drawing by my 6-year-old daughter. And in the drawing, there's a mountain and a guy climbing the mountain, and it says something like, "When you wish upon a star." So I took the picture so I could show it to her when I got back to, you know, prove that her picture had gone to the top of the mountain. And when I got back to Texas, one of the guys who had bought stock from me in the company I had just sold, his deal was, I get to be first. When you get back, I want you to sit down with your pictures and tell me the story first. And so my daughter and I went together to talk to this guy. His name was Bill. We sat down, we told him the story. I got to this picture, and he said, "What does it say again?" I said, "It says, 'When you wish upon a star.'" And he said, he got really quiet. And he said, "Did I ever tell you how I made the money that I used to fund your stock, which you used to fund this trip to Kilimanjaro?" And I said, "No, you didn't." And he said, "My uncle wrote that song, 'When You Wish Upon a Star,' and he died 2 years earlier, and Bill inherited the money." And so, so this is, you know, again, it's fun to start the story and end the story with something really nice like this. And so, in the end, I'll tell you, the cost and benefits of building a unicorn all come to one thing, and that is, it's all about the people. People say that corporations are evil, but corporations are people, and we, the CEOs and the entrepreneurs of the world, have to remember one thing. Our job as the founders of startup companies is to bring in the smartest people we can find to help us build these things, and then listen to them, support them, be their biggest cheerleader. And that's it, Hubert.
Awesome. And that's fantastic. The mountains you see behind me are the Austrian Alps, but to the confusion of everyone, I am not in Austria. This is a virtual background. So this picture I took last summer in Austria, but I am just like you all, quarantined in Dallas and in my house in Lakewood. So just in case anyone worried about not being around. So let's see about questions, Michael. Thank you for the presentation. I have the advantage of having heard Michael speak to our cohorts. Michael is also a mentor in the program, is very generous in the startup community and has spoken to the startups. And it's the type of conversation you need to have with startups to understand that it's not, I mean, you look now at Teledoc and say, oh my gosh, look how great. Well, let's talk about the peaks and valleys before and the death traps and so forth. So it's a long story. So let's see on questions. I'm scrolling down. I saw one that, Michael, I don't want to deprive you, but I think you probably wouldn't be able to answer. It says, would love to hear more about Teladoc financials. Stock market is going up, but net income seems negative. Can we hear more about cash flow projections? I mean, without preempting you, Michael is not with Teladoc anymore, and I doubt that's a question you can say much about. But
yeah, no, I really can't say much. I will tell you this. You know, there are companies that become the quote unquote market darlings, and Teladoc has certainly become one of those. It's the telemedicine leader right now, and I think the whole world is focused on how telemedicine has impacted healthcare and will continue to impact healthcare. And so, you know, from my own perspective, I am beginning to build something in the telemedicine space, and anybody out there who's building something telemedicine, love to hear from you. Hubert knows how to reach me.
Yeah, and just for completion's sake, this question was asked by Gregory Couvreur, and I just butchered your name, but you know what? Try my name, and I bet you'll do the same to me. And that's the best I could do. Sunny says hi, and she's of course met you along the way, and lots of compliments. So here's a question from Harvey Castro, and Harvey is one of our mentors in the program as well, an investor. Harvey writes, I'm writing a book that comes out in June. I happen to know about that, Harvey. I want to know what is your why? Why do you do what you do? What is your why that drives you? And thanks, Dr. Harvey Castro.
I think my why is like a lot of yours. You know, I am passionate about finding things that change everything. You know, the company that I built to pay for the Kilimanjaro trip was one of the first internet companies, and we delivered some cool internet technologies. I think we changed a lot in terms of technology and internet. Teledoc was the same way. Back to Space is all about changing something, creating a market, and making money for our stakeholders. So, you know, that's what it's all about. That's the why.
Okay, great. And I have, I was just looking at the chat, and now I realize there's a Q&A piece as well. So Michael, the next question from Mark is, at what point did you take VC money? Ooh, this could take a while. You probably have a point in time, well, but if you want to,
no, actually, this is really easy. So, you know, Dr. Brooks and I started working on the quote unquote napkin in 2001, in the summer of 2001. We filed articles of incorporation in January of 2002. We grew based on our friends and family and favors. We brought in a private equity group called New Capital Partners in late 2004, early 2005. We got to cash flow positive in fall of 2007. So when we started Teledoc, we were all by ourselves. By the fall of 2007, there was Consultadoc and Dialadoc and Phonadoc and all these other docs that were copying us. And we knew some of them had raised a lot of money. We knew the only way we were going to stay ahead was by raising significant capital. So we started talking to the VC market in December of '07, around the time we celebrated our millionth member. And by March of '08, we brought in our A round.
Okay, great. We have the next question is from an anonymous attendee. What is your in your opinion is the next innovation in digital health? Do you have any opinion on what's the next?
Yeah, I'm actually, you know, my big push right now is what I'm calling Teledoc 2.0. And I clearly recognize that they own the name Teledoc, and so, but I'm calling it that anyway. And to me, Teledoc 2.0 is an integration of a lot of things. And in Teladoc, what we did was we created an engine that made it more efficient for patients to see physicians. And by making it more efficient, we made it less expensive and more timely. The doctors made more money, the patients made more money. Now that the world has accepted telemedicine, I think we're in the growth stage of telemedicine, and with growth comes consolidation. So in the 1990s, when I was building Internet Global, there were thousands of internet companies, hundreds of them in Texas. Now there's 4 or 5. The same thing is about to happen in telemedicine right now. In a couple of years, there will be 4 or 5. And some of the other pioneers in telemedicine and I are out in the market right now looking for all of the little technologies and all of the small and medium-sized businesses and working on rolling them into a single entity that we are calling Teledoc 2.0. And the goal is to salvage those things, to make sure that we impact what Teledoc 2.0 or telemedicine looks like in a couple of years, and because we're capitalists, to make money for our stakeholders.
Okay. Next question from Sunny Nadolski. What was done right by Teladoc that made Teladoc successful, and many others who were building a similar solution that did not make it to become a unicorn?
Okay, so we were first by several years. And, you know, what we did wasn't all that innovative. You know, Dr. Jay Sanders created the idea of telemedicine back in the early 60s. It's sad that it took until 2001 for this to start. But what we did was we did it very carefully. And when the boards of medical examiners, quote unquote, attacked us, we went back to them and said, how can we fix this for you? How can we make this work? And I think that's the great piece of innovation that we had, was we refused to fight with them. We basically showed them over and over and over again through white papers, through thought leadership, through surgeons general that came with us, through HHS secretaries, that we weren't the enemy. We were there to make things better for the physician and for the patient.
Okay. And I remember your early stories, because we met when you were at Teladoc, and you were talking about the handoffs of the trucker that crosses the state lines, and just all these initial things that blew the minds of people, and who gets to prescribe it, and how ultimately you settled on having to have a licensed physician in each state, and then you employed ideally people with multiple licenses. I mean, it became very complicated to satisfy your primary set of rules. Next question is from Lance Manning. Can you speak more about the 1,000 per month to the 1,000 per day demand as an example of post-COVID-19 telemedicine? So the pediatrics, is it just pediatrics,
No.
or do you see that in other areas? If so, which ones
Yeah. So, some of the larger telemedicine practices may not tell you. I have heard through the grapevine that Teledoc is doing 2.5 to 3 times more consults per day now than they were prior. And I don't think we're going to return to an old time period where before this kind of level happened. In the case of Anytime Pediatrics, in the case of MediOrbis, both companies that I work with significantly right now, the growth has been amazing, and it's not just the number of patients that are coming in for consults. The investment community is circling around the telehealth investors right now and tossing money at them, and valuations are going crazy. So it's good times, it's boom times for those that are already established.
And I agree with you, Michael. We have probably telemedicine is the highest representation at Health Rockheaders in our portfolio, and we are of the same opinion that this is probably the thing that really supercharged the industry, even though it was doing quite well before. But introducing the necessity and now having people exposed to this experience, which is that first step, you gotta try it once and say, okay, it's actually okay. And you know what? I didn't have to drive and I didn't have to sit in a waiting room to get that to become a normal thing. So we're very bullish on that too. Next question from Moses Assam. What are your thoughts on AI being the next step in the telemedicine story? So artificial intelligence in telemedicine.
Right. AI is absolutely critical. As my partners and I in the quote unquote Teladoc 2.0, we are looking for AI. I think it's going to streamline the process. It's going to make the doctor more efficient. It's going to improve outcomes. And so, those of you that are working on AI, keep doing it. There's going to be lots of opportunities for you.
Great, thank you. Next question comes from Stephen Hochschuh. Hey, haven't heard from you in a while. So this is simple. What specialties does Teladoc cover? Or maybe you can tell a little bit about how you started and what you know about what is covered now.
Well, so in the beginning, it was really simple stuff. And we knew it had to be simple stuff. I'll tell you a really kind of funny story. We calculated roughly what percentage of things that walk into a doctor's office that could be handled by telemedicine. And we thought it was, I can't remember the exact number, but let's just say 75%. And so we thought the number of calls that were going to come in, that about 75% would be things we could treat. And I remember about a year into it, we were very, very data conscious. We analyzed everything, looked and relooked and studied, and we were treating about 90+% of the consults that were coming in the door. And that was red flags. All of our doctors got together, we analyzed and reanalyzed and try to figure out which doctors were treating things they shouldn't be treating. And we probably burned 2 or 3 days on this. And every time we looked at it closer, it still was 90-something% of the phone calls that came in. And then somebody just made just the most obvious comment, and that is, okay, so we know 75% of the things that walk into a doctor's office we could treat, right? Yes. And we're treating 92%. Yes. Well, we've forgotten one important thing. And well, what's that? The patient is smart enough to know it's a broken leg. I can't call Teladoc for a broken leg. I'm having a heart attack. I can't call Teladoc for a heart attack. So the reality is, and I was using extreme examples there, but the reality is the patients were smart also, and they self-selected.
That makes total sense. Let's see, we've got a little bit, 3 more minutes here. I've got another question from Sean. with all the recent relaxation of regulations on telehealth due to COVID-19, how do you see this playing out in the future also with Medicare, Medicaid, and private payer reimbursement?
Yeah, and so let me be a little more specific because in the early days of Teladoc, there were two battles. And smart entrepreneurs do not fight two battles, you fight one. So what were the two battles? One of them was, can a physician talk to a patient they've never met or touched? And the other one was, can a Texas physician treat an Oklahoma patient? Well, you can make lots of jokes about people from Oklahoma if you want. And in Texas, I'm sure we do that a lot. They are different up there. But the reality is a Texas physician can treat an Oklahoma patient. But of those two battles, the one that Teladoc chose to fight with the boards was, can a physician treat a patient they've never met or touched? We did not want to lose the second battle, and we would have lost it. The boards of medical examiners are like little kingdoms in each of the 50 states. I probably shouldn't say that. Maybe they're going to come and find a way to throw me in prison again now for saying that. But the reality is they have a lot of power and control, and probably rightfully so, in their states, and they weren't willing to give it up. And so why would the Texas Board of Medical Examiners want an Oklahoma physician practicing across state lines? They're not paying the fees to the Texas board, et cetera. And so that was a battle we didn't want to fight. So now going back to the question, that is one of the things that has been relaxed during this COVID period. Now the Texas doctor can talk to the Oklahoma patient. Will that stay in place? I don't know. I really don't think so. I think we will go back to the old ways. The things that won't change are people now recognize the value of telemedicine. Not just patients, but physicians and elected officials and corporations, et cetera. So I think, where we are going in the future is going to be very heavily weighted on the telemedicine side. And that's, from my chair, a good thing.
Thank you. Yeah, I would agree with that. There's a crisis money was meant for that, and probably go back to home turf protection. So one last question, and then we'll close. How do you see companies like Zoom compete in the telemedicine market? Aptly enough, we are on Zoom right now, and but that's from Veer, your startup entrepreneur that just presented.
Okay, so I think video helps quite a bit, but in the early days of Teledoc, we tested video quite a bit. It was complicated back then. Now everybody can press a button on their phone and they know how to do it. Back then, we had to teach the physicians how to do it. We had to teach the patients how to do it, and it was complicated. And the reality is, the good physicians told us that if you listen to your patient, they will tell you what's wrong. And apparently that is something that's taught in medical school quite a bit. So listening, I think, is the most important thing. But, we can find ways to treat a lot more when we have video, when we have data that we can pass, whether it be blood pressure or pulse ox or whatever. And so the more we can capture data, whether it be in video or otherwise, the better off we're going to be.
Yeah, agreed. That's there's a lot coming in that vein, and it's going to take a while to sort it all out. But the technology is there. I mean, just look at Veer startup, remote clinical trial observations and enhancing the ability to do clinical trials. We have startups in the high-risk OB-GYN space where you can't have access to certain resources. So this really very well could turn into the seminal moment for telemedicine, even though for us who've been in the industry, it seems like, you gotta be kidding me, really? After all these years, this is it? Like, this is what got you to talk to a doctor for the first time? But
Yeah.
you know, humans are humans, and I was sitting in this space exactly in my house, looking across the hallway, and my wife and my daughter were on their first telemedicine, or maybe the second telemedicine call with a dermatologist, and it takes 5 minutes, and it was much more convenient. So I get it.
Yeah.
We're all amenable to convenience as long as we can be convinced that things are safe. So I will close us out with.
One more thing, Hubert,
Yeah, go ahead.
before I punch out, and that is, look, we're all here because Hubert and the Wildcatters brought us together, and I think hopefully everybody recognizes the value of organizations like this. You know, we all need to be doing whatever we can to make sure that Health Wildcatters is here next year and 10 years from now and 25 years from now. And so, you know, Hubert, thank you very much for inviting me to come speak. And to all the rest of you, you know, whatever you can do to support this organization, you know, find a way to do it, because it's worth it.
Thank you. Thank you. It's a pleasure to have you, Michael, as always, and you're the most generous person donating your time whenever there's somebody who needs advice. We have a way to find you, and you find a way to get that entrepreneur onto your calendar. And it takes people like Michael to make this network work. Health Wildcatters is built on the backs of literally hundreds of mentors, and we rely on the community, and we're delighted to have a community like this in Dallas, in Texas, in North Texas, but spanning over the world. As you can see from the startups that are going to present next week, the majority are from elsewhere in the country, and that's how it's always been for Health Wildcatters. The reason is that our region attracts, or has the background and the backbone to attract and support startups of all kinds. Healthcare happens to be a very strong vertical in our region, and there's a lot of innovation in an appetite and interest in healthcare startups in our region. So thank you. We're looking forward to having everyone in our physical location again in the near future. We are, I think I had a closing slide, but I'm not going to do that. It really just says hi, bye. And I want to remind you of the info session this week on on Thursday. If you're interested in Health Wildcatters, you know any startups that might be interested or a fit for us, it is this season for us to look for startups that might join us in the fall. Number 2, med.ventures next Wednesday with the pitch competition, again, a free event, courtesy of our sponsors and specifically Healthcare Dealmakers Conference and Pulsinelli, who support us in that. And then our next Pulse in June, we will likely add other events throughout as we settle into the virtual portion of this. Other than that, have a great rest of the day. Enjoy the sunshine. Mine is never changing because it's a virtual background. But enjoy your day. And again, Michael, thank you. Veer, thank you. And thanks everyone for participating today. See you soon.